Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Before we begin today's journey into the human mind, if you find value in understanding why we do what we do, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us continue to produce deep dive content like this. Thank you. Now let's talk about something we have all felt, something that has destroyed relationships, ruined careers, and shattered peace. Let's talk about the fire inside. It starts with a spark. Maybe it was a tone of voice you didn't like. Maybe it was a car cutting you off in traffic. Maybe it was a look, a tiny disrespect, or simply a plan that didn't go the way you wanted. In a split second, something shifts. Your heart starts beating against your ribs like a trapped animal. Your hands tighten. Your vision literally narrows, focusing only on the threat, only on the problem. The heat rises up your neck, flushing your face, and suddenly, logic is gone. Reason has left the building. You are no longer you. You are a vessel of pure, unadulterated rage. You shout words you promised yourself you wouldn't say. You smash a hand against the table. You throw an object. You assert your dominance. You win the argument. Or at least, it feels like winning in that moment. The adrenaline makes you feel powerful, invincible, righteous. But then, the storm passes. The chemicals in your brain fade, the red mist clears, and you are left standing in the silence of the aftermath.
You look at the faces of the people you love, and you don't see respect. You see fear, you see exhaustion, you see distance. And then comes the crash, the shame, the heavy sinking realization that you lost control again. You promised yourself last time was the last time. You told yourself you would be calmer, more patient, more understanding. But the monster got out again. This is the cycle of chronic anger. And if you are watching this, chances are you, or someone you care about, is trapped in this loop. We often label angry people as bad people. We call them toxic, volatile, or abusive. And while the behavior is certainly destructive, the psychology behind it is far more complex and often far more tragic than it appears on the surface. We need to fundamentally change the way we look at anger. Society tells us anger is a sign of strength, or conversely, a lack of discipline. But psychology tells us something different. Anger is rarely just anger. In the world of emotional intelligence, we call anger a secondary emotion. Think of an iceberg. The part you see above the water, the shouting, the rage, the clenched fists, that is the anger. It is massive, dangerous, and visible to everyone. But icebergs don't float because of what's above the water. They float because of the massive structure beneath it. Underneath the waterline of anger, there is almost always something else. Something softer, something more vulnerable. For many people, anger is actually a bodyguard. It is a defense mechanism designed to protect a fragile ego or a wounded soul. When a person feels rejected, they get angry. When they feel ashamed, they get angry. When they feel scared, unseen, disrespected, or lonely, they get angry. Why? Because those primary emotions, fear, sadness, shame, make us feel weak. They make us feel small, and the human ego hates feeling small. So the brain performs a magic trick. It instantly converts that painful vulnerability into aggressive energy. It transforms "I am hurt" into "you are wrong." It transforms "I am scared" into "I am dangerous." It feels better to be the attacker than the victim. It feels safer to be the one shouting than the one crying. This is why the people who are the quickest to explode are often the ones who are carrying the heaviest invisible burdens. They aren't fighting you. They are fighting the feelings inside themselves that they cannot bear to face. To understand this, we have to look at the machinery of the human brain. We have to look at the neuroscience of rage. This isn't just a personality quirk, it is a biological hijacking. Inside your brain, there are two key players in this drama. First, you have the prefrontal cortex. This is the newest part of the human brain, evolutionarily speaking. It lives right behind your forehead. This is the CEO of your life. It handles logic, reasoning, impulse control, and long-term planning. It's the part of you that says, if I scream at my boss, I will lose my job, and I won't be able to pay rent, so I should stay calm.
But deep inside the brain, buried in the temporal lobes, are two almond-shaped structures called the amygdala. The amygdala is ancient. It is primitive. It is the smoke detector of the brain. Its only job is survival. It scans the environment 24/7 for threats. Is that a snake? Is that a lion? Is that an enemy holding a rock? When the amygdala perceives a threat, it doesn't have time to consult the CEO. If a tiger is jumping at you, you don't have time to think about the long-term consequences of running away. You just run. So the amygdala has an emergency override switch. It can literally shut down the neural pathways to the prefrontal cortex. It takes the thinking brain offline and activates the feeling brain. This is what psychologists call the amygdala hijack. Now here is the problem in the modern world. We are rarely chased by tigers. But the amygdala doesn't know the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat. To your ancient brain, your wife criticizing your driving feels like a predator attacking you. Your child ignoring your instructions feels like a challenge to your tribal authority. A rude email from a coworker feels like a spear thrown at your chest. The moment that trigger happens, the amygdala pulls the alarm. It floods your body with cortisol, the stress hormone, and adrenaline, the energy hormone. Your blood pressure spikes, your muscles tense up, ready to fight, and crucially, your IQ drops, literally. During an anger episode, your ability to process complex information, empathize with others, and foresee consequences creates a cognitive tunnel vision. You literally become stupider when you are angry. This explains why, in the heat of the moment, you say things that are factually untrue or incredibly hurtful, things you would never say when you are calm. You aren't thinking, you are reacting. You are a biological machine running a survival program in a situation that doesn't require survival. But there is another layer to the neuroscience that explains why chronic anger is so hard to break. It's addictive. This is a hard truth that many angry people deny, but deep down, they know it. Anger feels good, not happy good, but potent good. When you are sad, you feel lethargic and heavy. When you are anxious, you feel shaky and small. But when you are angry, you feel surged with energy. Adrenaline is a powerful drug. It numbs physical and emotional pain. It gives you a temporary sense of absolute certainty and control. For a person who feels powerless in their daily life, maybe they are struggling financially or they feel unappreciated at work. That burst of rage is the only time they feel like a king. They become the king of the ashes. They might burn everything down around them, but for those few minutes, they were in charge. The brain learns this pattern. It learns that whenever it feels the discomfort of sadness or insecurity, it can reach for the anger button to get a quick hit of dopamine and adrenaline. Over time, this becomes a neural pathway, a superhighway in the brain. The more you get angry, the easier it becomes to get angry next time. This is called neuroplasticity. Neurons that fire together, wire together. If you have spent 10 years reacting to every inconvenience with shouting, you have literally built a brain that is optimized for rage. You have trained your amygdala to be hypersensitive. It starts seeing threats where there are none. A glance from a stranger is interpreted as a glare. A mistake by a waiter is interpreted as a personal insult. You are walking through life with a smoke detector that goes off every time someone lights a candle. But the tragedy of this addiction is the toll it takes on the body and the soul. While anger makes you feel powerful in the moment, it is slowly poisoning you. Chronic anger keeps your body in a state of high inflammation. Cortisol, when present in the blood for too long, attacks the immune system, damages the heart, and even shrinks the hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory. Being angry all the time is literally killing you. Yet even knowing the biological mechanism isn't enough to stop it, because biology is only half the story. The other half lies in the past. To understand the rage of the adult, we almost always have to look at the silence of the child. Most people who suffer from chronic anger were not born this way. They were created. If we peel back the layers of the toughest, loudest, most aggressive people, We often find a childhood defined by two things: chaos or suppression. Let's talk about the chaos origin first. Many angry adults grew up in homes where anger was the primary language of communication. They watched their parents solve problems by shouting. They learned that the person with the loudest voice wins the argument. They learned that love is volatile, that safety is temporary, and that you have to strike first to avoid being hurt. Children are excellent mimics. If a child sees that daddy gets respect only when he screams, the child learns that screaming equals respect. They download this software into their developing brains and carry it into adulthood. But the suppression origin is even more common and often more dangerous. This happens in homes where children are not allowed to express negative emotions. Don't cry. Stop whining. Be a man. Don't be dramatic. When a child is punished for being sad or scared, they learn to repress those feelings. They shove them down into the basement of their subconscious. But emotions are energy. They cannot be destroyed. They can only be transformed. A lifetime of unexpressed sadness, unexpressed grief, and unexpressed needs eventually ferments. It rots. And under high pressure, it turns into a volatile gas. That gas is rage. The adult who explodes over a misplaced pair of keys isn't really angry about the keys. They are releasing 30 years of pressure from a valve that has been screwed on too tight. This creates a person who is constantly walking on eggshells, not just for others, but for themselves. They are terrified of their own emotions because they never learned how to process them. They only know how to hold them in or let them all out at once. There is no middle ground. There is no regulation. And this brings us to the concept of the shadow self. Psychologist Carl Jung spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we deny and hide. For the chronically angry person, their vulnerability is their shadow. They hate weakness in others because they hate the weakness in themselves. When they see someone crying, they might get angry at them. Stop crying. Toughen up. Why? Because that crying mirrors the part of themselves they have spent a lifetime trying to kill. They are attacking the reflection of their own inner child. It is a painful, lonely way to live. Because underneath the shouting, the angry person is usually desperate for connection. They want to be understood. They want to be loved. But their defense mechanism, the anger, pushes away the very love they crave. It is a self-fulfilling prophecy. They fear being abandoned, so they act in a way that forces people to abandon them. And when people leave, they say, "See, I knew I couldn't trust anyone. I knew everyone would leave me." And the anger grows deeper, justifying itself, building a fortress of solitude where they are safe, but completely alone. The tragedy of the angry person is that they are often good people with bad tools. They are trying to fix a watch with a hammer. They are trying to get their needs met, but they are using a method that ensures those needs will never be met. So, how do we break this cycle? How do we rewire a brain that is addicted to rage? How do we heal the wounded child hiding behind the bodyguard? It requires a journey into the uncomfortable. It requires us to stop looking at what triggered the anger on the outside and start looking at what the anger is protecting on the inside. This is where we must transition from understanding the problem to doing the work. The work of dismantling the bomb before it goes off. In the next part of this analysis, we are going to explore the specific psychological triggers that set you off, the cost of holding on to resentment, and the practical, proven methods to widen the gap between stimulus and response. We will look at how to finally retire the bodyguard so that the real you can step forward. But first, we have to sit with the reality of where we are right now. We have to acknowledge that the fire is burning, and it is burning us alive. But recognizing the fire is only the first step. To put it out, we have to understand what fuels it, and often the fuel is not what is happening in front of us, it is what is happening inside of us. One of the most powerful psychological drivers of chronic anger is a phenomenon called displacement. Displacement is a defense mechanism where the mind redirects a negative emotion from its original source to a safer, less threatening target. Picture this. A man goes to work. His boss humiliates him in a meeting. The boss criticizes his performance and dismisses his ideas. The man feels a surge of rage, but he cannot scream at his boss because he fears losing his job. His amygdala is triggered, but his prefrontal cortex clamps down on the reaction. He swallows the poison. He smiles, nods, and goes back to his desk, seething. He carries that unexpressed rage home in his chest like a grenade with the pin pulled. When he walks through the front door, he sees his son's backpack left in the hallway. It's a small, insignificant thing, but suddenly he explodes. He screams at his son for being irresponsible, for being messy, for never listening. The son is confused and terrified. He doesn't understand why a backpack warrants such a nuclear reaction. But the truth is, the father isn't yelling at the son. He is yelling at his boss. He is yelling at his own feeling of powerlessness. The son is just the safe target. The son won't fire him. This is the tragedy of displacement. The people we love the most often get the worst version of us, simply because they are the safest place for us to discharge our pain. Another major fuel source for anger is unrealistic expectations, or what psychologists call rigid rule-making. Chronically angry people often have a very specific, very rigid set of rules about how the world should work. Drivers should use their turn signals. People should be on time. My partner should know what I need without me asking. Life should be fair. They walk around with this mental rule book, constantly grading reality against their expectations. And because the world is chaotic, imperfect, and uncontrollable, reality constantly fails the test. Every time reality violates one of their rules, they take it as a personal insult. They view the world's imperfection as an attack on their order. The formula for anger is actually very simple. Anger equals reality minus expectations. The higher your expectations of control and perfection, the higher your anger will be when life inevitably gets messy. The angry person believes that their anger is a tool to force the world to follow their rules. They think, if I get angry enough, people will finally drive correctly. If I get angry enough, my partner will finally change. But this is the great illusion. Anger doesn't change others, it only isolates you. And this brings us to the devastating cost of being right. There is a saying, you can be right or you can be happy. The chronically angry person chooses to be right every single time. They become the prosecutors of their own lives, constantly building cases against everyone around them. They win the arguments, they prove their points, they crush the opposition with logic and volume. But they end up sitting alone in a room of silence. This isolation is profound. Friends stop calling because they are tired of walking on eggshells. Spouses stop sharing their true feelings because they fear the reaction. Children stop coming for advice because they don't want to be lectured. The angry person finds themselves surrounded by people who agree with them, not because they respect them, but because they are afraid of them. That is not connection. That is compliance. And compliance breeds resentment. Eventually, the angry person looks around and realizes they have become the king of the ashes. They rule over a kingdom where everything has been improved, corrected, and set straight, but there is no joy left in it. So, how do we step down from this throne? How do we rewire the brain to choose peace over power? It starts with the pause. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, famously said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom." For the angry person, that space, that gap between the trigger and the explosion, is microscopic, it's non-existent. The goal of anger management isn't to never feel angry. That is impossible. The goal is to widen the gap, to stretch that split second into 2 seconds, then 5 seconds, then 10. Neuroscience tells us that the chemical surge of the amygdala, that intense red mist sensation, only lasts about 90 seconds physically. If you can withstand the urge to act for just 90 seconds, the chemical wave breaks. The prefrontal cortex begins to come back online. Logic returns. But you need a tool to survive those 90 seconds. One of the most effective techniques is called name it to tame it. When you feel the surge, instead of acting on it, you simply name the emotion in your head. You say to yourself, I am feeling angry right now. My chest is tight. My hands are shaking. It sounds too simple to work, but the science is solid. When you label an emotion, you move activity from the emotional center of the brain to the language center of the brain. You literally force your thinking brain to wake up. You detach yourself from the experience. You become the observer of the storm rather than the storm itself. Another crucial shift is changing the narrative of intent. We tend to assume that when people hurt us, they do it on purpose. If a car cuts you off, you assume the driver is an idiot who doesn't respect you. But what if you changed the story? What if you told yourself, maybe that person is rushing to the hospital. Maybe they didn't see me because they are distracted by bad news. It doesn't matter if the story is true or not. What matters is what the story does to your physiology. The first story, disrespect, triggers rage. The second story, mistake, triggers empathy, or at least indifference. You are hacking your own perception to protect your peace. But the deepest work, the work that truly heals chronic anger, is forgiveness. And not necessarily forgiveness of others, but forgiveness of yourself. Many people hold on to anger because they believe that if they let it go, they are letting people off the hook. They think their anger is a punishment for those who wronged them. But there is a famous quote, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. You have to realize that your anger is not punishing the person who cut you off in traffic. They don't even know you exist. Your anger is not punishing your parents for what they did 20 years ago. They might be oblivious or even dead. Your anger is only punishing you. It is burning your walls, your heart, your joy. To heal, you must thank the bodyguard. You have to acknowledge that your anger tried to protect you when you felt vulnerable. It served a purpose once. But you have to tell it, gently but firmly. Thank you for trying to keep me safe, but I don't need you to fight this battle anymore. I am strong enough to handle this without burning the house down. It is a slow process. You will fail. You will yell again. You will lose your temper. But the difference is, now you know what is happening. You have the map. And every time you catch yourself, every time you choose to take a deep breath instead of a cheap shot, every time you choose silence over shouting, you are rewiring your brain. You are carving a new path. You are learning that true strength is not found in how loud you can roar, but in how calm you can remain when the world tries to shake you. You are learning that you don't need to be the fire. You can be the water, and water in time cuts through the hardest rock. Thank you for watching. If this video resonated with you, or if you saw a part of yourself in these words, you are not alone. The journey from rage to peace is the hardest journey a person can make, but it is the only one worth taking. Stay strong, stay aware, and I will see you in the next video.